We're on the air.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being produced here at Think Twice Radio, the home of the future. And we do thank you very much, Richard Wicca, our producer. So we're grateful to Richard, and I am grateful to be here. I'm Vicki Ross, the executive director at the Western New York Peace Center, and we have a very special program today with two, actually, national figures, and I would even say international figures that we have
Almost.
here. And
Not
our
Mark.
topic,
Not Mark.
yeah, no, both of you are. Both of you are, although he doesn't have a viral video yet. But anyway,
Soon,
so we have our topic
It's
is
coming.
well. I'll just start with our guests. Our guests are. We'll just go counterclockwise. So here's Martin Gugino, friend of the show, treasurer of the Latin American Solidarity Committee of the Western New York Peace Center, and world renowned for being pushed over, for being a pushover. In Buffalo, in Niagara Square in Buffalo, this past summer, about a year ago, when the Buffalo police were clearing the square, and that video was shown. Now I've seen that it's 85 million people have seen that video, and that is just from the original video, because of course it was also shared. So when you figure, I don't know how they estimate it, but it is many millions, maybe even 100 million, maybe more. Anyway.
These are not unique people. Some people have watched it more times, like I've watched it 10
Well,
15.
that's true. That's a good point. And
I've watched it
next but not least, we are so thrilled to have you with us, Mark Colville. Mark is one of, a dear friend, is with the Amistad Catholic Worker in New Haven. With means with, between you and Luce, you're running that very, very wonderful house of hospitality for the Catholic Worker, and is also one of the 7 wonderful, courageous activists of the Kings Bay Plowshares. So, Mark, thank you for coming. Thank you for zooming in.
Great to be here.
So it's always an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to have you. So we have a lot to talk about today. So we thought we'd talk about justice and the criminal justice system. Well, there's lots of directions we can go with that. But first, I'm going to say Mark just had his sentencing. So let's really start with that. And also the Kings Bay Plowshares, which many of you who've watched this show, or many people know all about that, know lots about it. They may not, none of them know as much as you do about it. Anyway, but it is it's, certainly many of us have been following very, very intently.
Oh, no.
So why don't you just, I'm sure you're used to giving the overview of what happened, and then let's talk about your sentence and your sentencing statement. Then we'll get into the trial and all that. So,
Okay.
Mark.
Yeah. So actually, the action took place in April of 2018. So 3 years ago, on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And what we did was what's called a plowshares action at Kings Bay Naval Base in southern Georgia. It's the home port of 6 Trident submarines. Now the Trident submarine is the most destructive weapon system ever created by human civilization. It's also a very, very destabilizing, which is to say first strike nuclear weapon system. The plowshares action, for those who may be unfamiliar with it, plowshares movement started in 1980 with an action at the GE plant in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, on the Mark 12 missile, which was being developed there and built there. Basically, plowshares movement takes its inspiration from an ancient prophecy in the Hebrew scriptures, found in the book of Isaiah, chapter 2, verse 4. And in that, the prophecy speaks of a time when nations will no longer lift the sword against another nation, nor shall they train for war again. They shall hammer their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. So weapons of war will be converted into weapons for life, or tools for life, that is. Farming tools.
Right.
That's
right.
imagery used
Right.
in this prophecy. And so what we do is plowshares actions are typically preceded by a forming of a small community of folks who are willing to take this kind of risk. Basically, what the movement is about is trying to initiate this process of nations disarming, starting with our own. The American empire being the by far the biggest holder of nuclear weapons among the nuclear weapon states, and the United States, unlike other nations, has a first strike policy.
Right.
Our weapons are on hair trigger alert, and we have never renounced the policy of being willing to use nuclear weapons first. So, a lot of people come back and talk to us about, if Russia just disarmed, but the fact is, if you do the analysis, the political analysis of the situation, it is the United States that, first of all, that forces all the other nuclear states to have these weapons. And then secondly, keeps everybody in the world in danger because of our first strike policy. And so plowshares actions are an attempt, a symbolic disarmament, where we actually go to the site. From a faith perspective, I would say we go to the site of the sin in order to repent of it. Okay. Now, for me, and by the way, plowshares is while it takes its inspiration from a biblical prophecy, by no means is it a Christian movement or even a religious movement in the sense that many people of all faiths or of no faith have taken part in these actions. So it's a way of initiating the process of disarmament. So we went to Kings Bay, as I said, on the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination. And we chose that day particularly because we wanted to amplify King's analysis that, he kind of summed it up in a quote that really became a clarion call for us. And that is the ultimate logic of racism is genocide. The ultimate logic of racism is genocide. And we actually took that quote, we put it on a banner with his face, and we brought that into the base with us. But typically what we did in this case was we took household hammers, some of which were actually made from melted down guns. And we went into this base. There were 7 of us. We split up into 3 different groups, and we addressed 3 different areas in the base. One is weapons bunkers, where the weapons are actually kept. Of course, that was a very high security and lethal force zone. And we cut through a couple of the fences there, trying to get as close as possible to the weapons before the Marines showed up and stopped us. There's also located in the middle of this base is what I can only describe as a shrine to nuclear weapons. And several of the replicas of these missiles are, standing there in sort of it's like an invitation to come and worship them, basically. It gives honor not only to the weapons, but to the policy surrounding them. And then, so a couple of us addressed that area as well. And then there was an administrative building nearby that we brought an indictment of the government, and we nailed that to the front door.
Right.
But we took the hammers. We hammered on these the missile replicas. We poured blood, safely drawn from ourselves, and of course these symbols are very important. Of course, the hammer, going with with this prophecy,
Right.
and then the blood as a real important symbol of what these weapons do and how those who launch them do not see what's on the other end of them. And so we went in there. We did this, and then we awaited arrest. We went through a long trial. Of course, a lot of this was delayed by COVID between the trial and the sentencing. But the trial itself took an unusually long period of time because of various delays, which I won't get into at the moment. But anyway, as I said, we were all scheduled for sentencing a year ago when the pandemic hit and we were all locked down. Okay, so from that point, we were getting postponements. Suddenly in October, we were getting postponements on the sentencing from the judge on a month-by-month basis. Suddenly, last October, the judge refused to give any more postponements. And of course, we're talking about Georgia. And last October in Georgia was the absolute height of the
craziness,
level of infection and all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but for no discernible reason except as the judge said, I gave you 5 postponements. I'm not giving you a 6th. She obliged folks then to appear for sentencing. Out of the 7, I refused because I was not satisfied with the justification for that. I wasn't going to travel to Georgia until the governor of Connecticut indicated that it was safe, and he still hasn't. And then, of course, the court was offering the option to do sentencing by video conference. But in order to do that, you must give up your constitutional right to be seen and heard in person.
Right.
I refused to give up that right. I invited the judge to come pick me up with federal marshals if she wanted to. And then apparently she relented. And so anyway, long story short, I was the last to be sentenced. I was sentenced last week. And I actually did the sentencing by video conference at that point.
Well, it actually, I know from experience, just a tiny bit of experience, and I was not facing 25 years or some ridiculous amount of time like that. But for I do remember that having charges hanging over your head. Oh, how terrible! Oh, how. You just can't plan for anything. You just don't know. And it's just emotionally, it's hard. It's really hard. So sometimes it's just, to get it over with. But anyway, I want to say, first of all, your actions are so courageous, and all of you, and you've all done such a beautiful job of just getting it out there. And in the meanwhile, nuclear weapons have been made illegal under international law as well. So all the more, so I want to say what I really want to talk about is the political trial. Because it's been such an exercise for me in my own little tiny experience of being one of the Hancock 38. And when Ramsey Clark came and that was one of his many, many times that he helped activists present their case, which, our right case of, because the activists are about following. First of all, the law is only meant to be an approximation of justice anyway. And then, so we know that law has been used to make things that are wrong be legal. So the law is sometimes right and sometimes wrong, right? So Hitler, everything he did was legal in Germany anyway. He just made sure it was. He just changed the law to say that he could do whatever he wanted to do. Whatever
Sure,
murderous things.
and of course, almost all Christians will conveniently forget that the execution of Jesus was in fact legal as well.
Right. And it was all about unjust political trials. Political trials, right? So I mean, so let us talk about the trial. Now, one of the things that was somebody told, I don't even remember who told me this, and maybe it was you, but somebody said that one of the jurors had asked the judge, "What are there really nuclear weapons on that base, or is that just hearsay?"
Right. So here's why we were subjected to a political trial. This is why I say that.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
because
say it. Yeah.
Before we ever entered that courtroom, there were at least two decisions that were already in place. Okay.
Right.
Which were very pertinent, of course, to our defense. Okay.
Right.
One was that the whole nuclear program is done in complete secrecy. Okay, nobody ever voted for any of this.
Right.
Obviously. Okay. And the weapons themselves, the nature of their destructive capacity, et cetera, it's all kept under wraps. For example, in our trial, witnesses for the prosecution on the stand, military personnel, they refused to answer that very question, whether there were nuclear weapons on the base. And they got away with that, okay? So secrecy was the first thing, that basically the government doesn't have to give up any information about the policy around literally holding a gun to everybody in the world's head all the time.
Right.
With the gun cocked, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to justify that. They don't have to explain it. They don't have to tell us where these weapons are. Are they killing the earth just sitting there? The poison involved in this, in the development of these weapons,
right.
From the uranium right through onto the finished product. They don't have to divulge any of it. And then, okay, so that was the first decision that was already in place. And the second one was that under no circumstances would the legality of nuclear weapons be subject to scrutiny in the court. Okay? And of course, in large part, it's not total, but in large part, the reason we do these actions is precisely to get the legality of nuclear weapons to be wrestled with in court so that the public can have some idea of what it is that this government is calling our national security. Okay.
Right.
And
right.
so that what that meant, those two decisions meant, was that we were going to be subjected to a political trial. Okay. Because those are political decisions. All right.
Right.
A political trial, no chance really for us to mount a defense if we can't, speak about what it is we were doing. Okay. And of course, the jury is just operating under this situation of near complete ignorance.
Right. Right.
They simply don't. And usually, and I've been through two of these trials now for Plowshares actions. It's obvious that the jury knows that there's something going on here aside from, a bunch of guys jumped out of a car and, maybe there was a case of beer in the back and they went and vandalized this place or something, I mean, this is what based on the information that a jury gets that the jury got in our trial, they could have easily concluded that. Okay. But of course, typically as with this jury, they were thinking, there's something going on here that doesn't make sense. Okay. And so at one point, and this wasn't even during the deliberations or anything, but at one point the jury asked the judge, because it was during our defense portion of the trial, and we had testified, several of us, about the weapons that were on that base. Now, the jury asked the judge point blank, their testimony that there's nuclear weapons on the base, was that speculation or was that fact? And the judge, the court, refused to answer the question. Okay, and the reason they refused to answer it is because they deemed it irrelevant. Okay,
Which
so
is
that
so much.
that is what we were subjected to. You know, I mean, it's like you read in history books, you read about, you know, political show trials and
Right.
in other nations like China or whatever. This is exactly what this is.
Right. Right.
And it's happening right here, you know, in the United States now. Okay.
Well, to me, there's two things. One is, first of all, you're not allowed to tell your story, really. You're not
Exactly.
allowed to tell your story.
Right.
It's not permitted to be heard. Your version of your story, except that maybe in the sentencing statement a little bit when it's all over, right?
Yeah.
And even
When there's
then,
no jury there.
when
Yeah.
there's no jury there, right? Exactly. And the other thing, so it's sort of like the decision is already made, or the question is not allowed to be even asked.
Raised.
What the first question? What really happened? So what happened is got to be the whole picture of what happened. So what's the situation that in which you did these things?
The context.
It's like I used the context exactly, and I used this example to you the other day, Mark, on the phone. I have to share it when I'll never forget. This was in a banking seminar where I saw they show this picture on the screen, and here's a man. He's in a canoe. It's all very peaceful looking, you know, on the water. You see the little ripple like that, and you know, and it says so far so good. And then they zoom it back, and you see that he's just at the tip of Niagara Falls, you know, at just where you can't see that it's all going over, you know, and he's just that far away from it. Because you don't get the context. So the context is the astronomical power of these, the lack of discussion or addressing of these. And there was a time where there was a lot of furor and there was all kinds of awareness. But now it's sort of like ho-hum, that the big, it's the gigantic elephant. I mean, the overwhelming, huge, gigantic thing looming in the background that is not allowed to be discussed, and
Right.
especially not in the courtroom.
Yeah. Well, and of course, you know, we brought GoPro cameras into this place with us, and so we wanted to document the whole action.
Right.
So it was never a question of disputing facts, okay?
Right.
With the prosecution.
Right,
Never
sure.
a question of. I mean, we basically handed them their whole case.
Right.
Okay. Because
Right.
we documented it by video. Okay.
Right.
We freely stipulated to everything that we did because we're proud of it.
Right.
Because in fact, what's going on behind that fence at Kings Bay is criminal activity.
Absolutely.
It's a criminal syndicate. Okay. And that obviously is what we wanted a jury to
See.
understand,
Right.
and then give us a verdict. Okay.
Right.
So we were hamstrung at nearly every point during this trial to actually communicate to a jury what it is they were deliberating. Okay. And so they had no possibility of knowing. And by the way, you know, again, to contextualize this, our trial took place in Brunswick, Georgia. In the same neighborhood, you could probably walk in 10 minutes from that courthouse to the place where Ahmaud Arbery was murdered last summer.
Wow.
Okay. I spent 15 months in the county jail there, down the street from the courthouse. Okay. I had, you know, I was, and this is, it's not even, it's called the Glynn County Detention Center. It's called a detention center because nearly everybody who's in there is not convicted of anything. Their cases haven't been adjudicated yet, but they can't afford bail. Okay. So people, the average length of stay in that place is 6 months for people who are accused. Okay. most of them who are accused of something are accused of a probation violation, okay? Because typically in that courtroom, judges typically give periods of probation, supervised release, of anywhere from like 5 to 20 years.
Wow.
Can you imagine being on
Yes.
probation for
No.
10, 20 years
No, no.
and
no.
staying out of trouble? I mean, if you're on probation and you are walking down the street at night, and God forbid you're black, right? A cop can stop you, ask for your ID, put your name through the computer system, find an outstanding warrant, or even find that you're on probation,
Right.
and then come up with a reason for putting you in that jail. And then you've got to wait months and months and months before you even get a hearing.
Right.
In many cases.
Right.
Okay. So that's the situation, so there's a real connection between the victimization of people right in that neighborhood. Okay. Through the court system and the jail system, and what's going on down a little bit down the coast at Kings Bay. Okay. It's a criminal operation. And we're trying to expose the whole thing by taking a piece of it. We look at nuclear weapons as sort of the Jesuit priest McSorley years ago called it the taproot of violence in our society, because once you, as he put it very eloquently, once we agree that it's okay to use nuclear weapons, there isn't a violence that is not justified after that. Once murdering our own children becomes an option, then there's really nothing else, that you could say, oh, we'd never do that, And so, in large part, what we're trying to do, just by grabbing onto this issue of nuclear weapons, is trying to expose the violence that just imbues the whole system, okay? And also to lift up the daily victims of that violence, which is the poor, okay? And obviously people of color, as we see being played out now in Minnesota.
So I will mention this case, and actually we were thinking we might have Betty Jean Grant or somebody who was very much associated with this case. Actually, maybe we'll give them a chance on the radio show if they want it. But that's the way I'm trying to go. The Buffalo Five were 5 young black teenagers who were tried and convicted of something. They were accused. The 5 of them were accused of murdering a man across the street from a bar in Buffalo in the winter, and they said they didn't do it. But one of them, they kept working on him, and then he turned state's evidence, said that they did do it. Now, in the meanwhile, this happened in Buffalo in the winter with snow on the ground. You could see that there were just the 2 sets of footprints in the snow. The man who was killed, it was at his house across the street from the bar. And the person who killed the person, right? And yet these 5 were tried, and one of them had turned the state's evidence. One of them was able to get a good lawyer who was able to prove that he didn't do it because of the footprints and all the other. There was no evidence that they did do it. There was evidence that they didn't do it, and so he got off. Meanwhile, the other 3 were convicted. And they served over 100 years total, and then they served all this time on probation, on parole. I'm not even sure. I think, are they still on parole, Marty? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know. No, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I can't remember. They might still be, but they're still struggling, and they're still pushing to get their case looked at and to get their names cleared, because they did not do it. And and so this is where I want to say state-sponsored, state-permitted violence and political trials. So there's the political trial of yours, where it was that and I love to quote you on this, where right after the trial you said, well, the Pentagon has bases all over the world, and this is one of them, right? And it was, because they were just defending the Pentagon, wouldn't talk about the Pentagon, wouldn't examine their bad acts, wouldn't even discuss the plain truths that are well known, and let you even just tell your story of what you did, right? But also in this case, they also have ample reason. It's obvious, it couldn't be more obvious that these guys did not do it. And yet, they won't examine it. They won't. It's just been kicked down the road because the people who were involved, they don't want to sully their good reputation, or some of them are still having official roles in the justice system, etc. So it's about the state not being willing to admit it's wrong. So it's back to, as a state entity, then that's where the political trial comes. Because the state entity protects the state.
Yes. Absolutely.
I want to throw in one thing,
Please.
and that is that they were convicted of trespassing. I mean, other things too, but just trespassing itself, meaning you can't even be here. You have no right to be here. That's what trespassing is. You're just standing here. It's illegal. You can't stand here. So what does that make of the right to petition the government for redress of grievances?
Right.
But you can't even stand here? And we have to go on the sidewalk and shout? Is that what you're thinking of?
And here's the other piece. Didn't there were kids, some guys who did just what you said, who, I don't know if they'd been drinking beer or not, but I know that there were people who broke in to, like, get some weapons and stuff, steal some weapons and stuff, and they got a slap on the wrist, and you all were charged with 25 years for trying to expose the crimes of the government.
Yes, actually.
Trying to amplify.
Yeah, I mean, that what you're referring to there, Vicki, is this happened while I was in the county jail there.
Oh, okay.
It was about a year after our action, where it came out in the news there that personnel on the base, military personnel on the base, and I believe at least one civilian working on the base, had conspired to steal plastic explosives, ammunition, and some other protective equipment used in battle zones or whatever. That they had stolen this stuff from the base, and they had buried it in one of their yards. I believe there were 5 people involved in this that were arrested. Now, keep in mind, when we were arrested, we had $50,000 cash bond bail for us. I mean, it was even high for that area at the time. These folks, they came from, again, they were military personnel mainly. They came from like 4 different states, not Georgia, okay? They were all given, what do they call that? PR bond, personal recognizance. No money to be put up, no restrictions. They just had to return for court. So you might imagine I was a little steamed sitting there in the jail.
Outrageous. Outrageous.
And I mean, these are people, and we obviously were, we went in there with a, nonviolent intent, and, we made it clear that, that was our purpose. It was a nonviolent direct action. Okay.
Right. So this is,
and by the way, the day after our action, the PR, the head of PR at the base, proudly trumpeted to the Washington Post that at no time was anybody in danger when we were on the base, that we were completely nonviolent, and nobody was in any danger at all. And of course, we went to the trial, and they brought witness after witness up there telling how dangerous everything was.
And that's another thing. Didn't they accuse you of doing like mammoth amounts of damage, thousands of dollars worth of damage or something?
Oh,
Well,
Is
they,
that right?
they pulled out an arbitrary figure of $33,000 something about the so-called damage that we did. By the way, I don't acknowledge that anything was damaged, because
sure.
nuclear weapons, first of all, are not property. They're not proper to human life. They're certainly they're not. They don't have a right to exist. Okay, so they're valueless in my mind.
zero, negative.
Yeah.
But also, did you even did you touch them? No.
Well, no, again, plowshares, we have a very, particular way of doing this. And we,
Right.
it's nonviolent,
Right.
Both in word and deed, and also in symbol. We're not, like, for instance, I mentioned when folks went to where the weapons bunkers are, a deadly
Right.
force zone,
Right.
and they began cutting through the fences. The Marines pulled up with their guns drawn and told us to stop.
Mm-hmm.
At which point, people stopped
Right.
and knelt down and prayed. That's how the whole thing went. And
Right.
even their own witnesses testified that that at no time were they in any danger.
But also, I mean, I just want to understand property damage. When people are claiming property damage, so there was the cutting of the fences. There's a little blood put, so that had to be cleaned up. Now, is that property damage? If it was on stone, like say, people are very paranoid about blood and infections and things now, so maybe if they had to like sand it down a little tiny, I mean, where is $33,000? And you put up banners, where is $33,000 of property damage? That's just
The
ridiculous.
In fact, that question was asked by our lawyers. That
Sure.
question was asked,
Uh-huh.
and the prosecution was never obliged by the judge to justify that figure. And it became an important figure in terms of sentencing, right? Because the higher the so-called damage
Right.
figure,
Right.
the more that bumps you up in your sentencing guidelines, and that's why our guidelines were sort of particularly high. And again, they never had to justify or itemize
Just
that whole
pick
thing.
a number out of the air.
Pick
So
a
even
number
though-
out of the air.
Yeah, nothing that
You know,
nothing.
And most of what had to be done was like painting, painting over things. And
Right.
you can't tell me that they're not going to take a few soldiers out of the drunk tank who, were on house restriction because they got drunk last week. You're not going to bring them over there with a $2 paintbrush and paint the thing. That's exactly what they did.
Right.
But
right.
they charged. I don't know. They charged
Oh,
thousands
it might
of
have been
dollars. for labor.
$20. So they're talking about $20 when they're calling it. They're multiplying it by a factor of what,
Yeah.
thousands.
Well, again, I mean,
thousands of times.
it's another example of how
Right.
the government will just. I mean, they get away with anything they want, especially in a court situation.
So-
And all you got to do is say national security.
Oh, and here's the other thing I want to talk about. Okay, so political trial. First of all, I want to tell people to watch the trial of the Chicago 7. Although I've heard people calling it the trial of the Chicago 8, and I do like to call it that because poor Bobby Seale. But anyway, they do such a beautiful job of showing you what is a political trial. Well, I also have felt that I have had a real education both in the courtroom, in person or listening to your all sentencing or whatever. When you hear these judges who are just, at very pains to explain and going over and over and over. First of all, you can't even barely hear them, right? They think, can you hear wait a minute. I can't even do it. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? It's like, you can't hear them. You can barely hear them. And so that's like a power play. So you're like always going, huh? Like, what are they saying? And then they're also like, do you understand? asking you over and over again in so many different ways whether you understand or whether you've had a chance to say everything you want to say. Well, no, you haven't gotten a chance to say anything you want to say because the real important part of the story has been disallowed from the courtroom.
Right.
So, but they still ask you, oh, do you have any more comments you want to make? Yes. No, it's that's so ridiculous.
Don't use the word fascist. Don't use the word fascist in your comment.
I didn't use that word, but I should.
No.
That they
instruction.
Yeah, and there's an instruction. Right? Oh, and then the instructions to the jury, which are yet another manipulation, when they go on and on and on, so that the people are just dizzy with the amount of BS that's been thrown at them about all the things they need to do and not do and everything else, till they're totally confused when actually, as you put it so beautifully, I think it was you. Who was it? Were you? Yes, it was you, wasn't it? With Ellen Grady and it was Ellen and you and Father Bill who got acquitted in Hancock in the courtroom at Hancock for one of the Hancock actions, and where it was made plain to the people on the jury, you are the kings and queens of the courtroom. You can do what you want. You can decide what you want. You can see it however you want, no matter what anybody says. And that's the so-called jury nullification, which is another example of calling things calling things what it's not, because it's not nullifying the jury. It's a total empowerment of the jury.
Right.
But anyway, does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's how the juries are forced to work. They never. I mean, if you ever say the word jury nullification in a courtroom, it usually makes the judge scream.
Right.
I mean, literally.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
In fact, they can even call a mistrial when you do that. Although, of course, you know, that is the absolute juries do have absolute power.
Right.
In the courtroom setting, once they get the case, they can set aside all of the judge's instructions if they choose to. Okay, but those instructions are always articulated by the judge in such a way that, I mean, if you're just an average person from the street,
right,
you would think to go against the judge's instructions would be some kind of crime itself. You know,
right.
That's how they are instructed. Is that right, Martin?
Well, no, but actually the judicial system is the most democratic branch. You drag in these regular people and you have these other regular people comment, what do you think? Is this okay or not okay? And the kind of the problem in your case was that you were prevented from giving the jury any legal justification for saying, yeah, that's fine. They said no First Amendment. So, I mean, in a political trial, that is the heart of the defense. Mm-hmm. So, I've said too before, why are you having a trial? If they can't explain what they were doing,
right,
and why they,
exactly.
A fair trial means you have to be able to present your opinion.
Right, and what you were doing. What were you doing? Right. So you never get to really tell what you're doing because it's obfuscated by well, first of all, just outlawing it in the courtroom.
Right, you can't see it. So that's judge nullification. The judge nullification.
Well, the judge is nullified. It's actually, that's why I said, though, the word nullification, and they call jury nullification, is an oxymoron. It's exactly an oxymoron because it's a jury empowerment. It's not that the jury is become null. No, they've become, they can call the shots, even though the judge is this dizzying figure where, you have to kowtow and, stand up when he comes in, bow down when he goes out.
Oh, but Vicki, so it gets to another point too. Nullification in the sense that you're brushing aside that law. You say this law does not apply to this case. And that's what the Religious Freedom Restoration Act says. You have to allow an as-applied challenge. You have to allow the people to say, these laws don't apply in this situation. Well, what's the situation? Well, you can't tell them what the situation is. No.
Right.
But see, what you're both
vandalism.
pointing to is a very important concept. You know, the judge. This is why the jury is supposed to have the most power, because the judge does not have a right to nullify the law. The jury does, based on what they hear. You know, the context of what these people did and why. That's important to a jury. A judge does not have the right to nullify the law. A jury does. A jury can say, our jury could have said, if they had any information at all, they could have said, yeah, they cut through that fence and they admitted it, but that's not a crime in this context.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, they hammered on these things and they cut through those fences to get to those bunkers. But why did they did it? Why did they do it? I mean, it's just like, you know, you run into a burning building with a no trespassing sign and you save a kid. Well, who the heck is going to prosecute you for that? Right? I mean, that's obviously necessity law. But I mean, that is the reason. A jury can set aside, nullify the law if they want to.
But
a judge cannot.
Our
judges do that all the time before a trial starts. They nullified the law that outlaws nuclear weapons. It's constitutional. I could argue the Constitution right now and tell you why nuclear weapons are illegal.
Oh yes,
I couldn't do it before a jury, but there is an argument.
Oh, there's
and
a
it's
very
pretty
strong.
obvious one.
Yes, it is. Well, this is the part that gets me upset is that they do not. Well, it's back to not allowing the important parts of the trial. You know, when somebody can't, their whole defense is the necessity defense, right? That's what we're talking about every time is that it's civil resistance, trying to get the government to uphold the law or to have, to uphold the law in this case, international law, and also just, human, the Declaration of Human Rights. And now it's, the illegality of nuclear weapons. And so when you're not allowed to talk about that, then you're not allowed to present your case. You're not allowed to present your case. It's just open and shut. Judge is not allowing it,
Right.
And it's just, and in fact, one of the things that makes me so, so against our criminal justice system, because so much of it is about trivia. Just trivia and little excuses, the letter of the law. The big questions cannot be even brought into the courtroom a lot of times, right? Are not even discussed. So that means they're not really looking at what happened. They're just looking at this little, it's like the whole story of the elephant when, what is your perspective on the elephant for when you only see this much? You just see a little patch of skin. You think, oh, well, that's a piece of leather. It's not a whole big elephant. Right?
Right.
Because you're just seeing this much, and that's what they do with the court cases.
Yeah, but it's important also to understand that, if we believe in justice, that despite the fact that our courts now are so corrupt and so inept, at applying the law, despite that. The law is important,
Right.
and
sure,
right, and God forbid somebody like me says that because I break some laws all the time, in order to try to get at justice, right? But I mean, these things are going to change if the human experiment has a future.
Right.
This is going to change, okay?
Right.
And so while it's certainly, from my perspective, going through this thing, going through court, and for all of you as well, it can seem futile. It often does seem futile to do this, okay? And yet, at the same time, you need to have a longer view because it is very important that these abuses of the law, these corruptions of the court, they're basically owned and bought and paid for by the corporations and all, And of course, they're totally house trained by the national security state at this point. Okay, that situation will not change if it doesn't get challenged repeatedly. It has to be challenged on every level. Okay, and so I mean, while we're talking about how bad our justice system is and how pointless it seems really to, what we did in many ways seems pointless in terms of going into a courtroom and trying to make an argument. It's very important that we do it. Okay.
Well, I want to say we did have a little victory, a huge victory, really, this today when Cariel Horn. I was trying to see if we could get her on the show, but we would have had way too much cover. But I would just say briefly, she wasn't the officer who was fired from the Buffalo Police Department in like 2006 for stopping an Eric Garner
type situation.
Type George Floyd type situation, where she actually tackled an officer who was virtually strangling somebody so that they couldn't breathe. And she lost her job. She lost her pension. Well, she just got her pension back today. Meanwhile, that was part of it was through getting Cariel's law passed, which we and many others helped with, pushed it, finally got adopted in Buffalo. And then the law made it obvious that she should have her pension restored because people should not pay a price for doing that kind of heroic thing, which is just the kind of thing that we need police to actually do. Hold each other accountable, correct each other when they're wrong. I want to tell you that we're almost out of time, and I was just checking to see what we didn't address. So I want to just say on the thing of militarism, we didn't go very far with that. But of course, at the root of all the militarism, the epitome of the worst of it, to me, is as he said, the taproot, is the nuclear program. But the other thing is there's this huge ask for a big increase in the military budget. Some of it's for nuclear, some of it's for just back to being the world's biggest, greatest purveyor of violence in the world. I've comments from either of you, and I want to say in those comments, just remember that we have about 4 minutes altogether until we have to sign off.
Okay. Well, let me say, I want to talk about something else. That's way too big to talk about. 2 minutes and 2 minutes. I can't. I mean, of course, we should stop this.
We should stop it. Yeah, I think you covered it. Now
But
that's all we need to know.
But I want to go back to something that. Oh my gosh. Something that.
That's Joe Biden
Mark
calling you for advice.
It is.
Yeah.
Saying, what did you just say?
Yeah, it's the security state telling you to put a lid on it.
No, but he was talking about running into a building to save a child.
Yeah.
So then at the trial, the judge says, well, now you're not going to be offering that necessity defense. You cannot allow that in New York State. You say, no, Your Honor, no. I was going to tell him I'm a fireman. No, you cannot tell him you're a fireman either. You cannot tell him you're a fireman.
Right.
So no. So but these guys are firemen. Every American is a fireman.
Right, turn your phone off, will you?
Because it says you can complain. The First Amendment says you can complain.
Okay, so that
and they say no, you can't. You can't. No complaining.
Right. No, there's a lot of complaining needed, and I think we've done a fair bit of it. But anyway, the good part is there are people who are as courageous and committed. And so I just what's your final words for people? You have a chance now here for some final words for now. Final words for now.
Give up.
End of the bucket. What? Yeah.
Well, I would, as a final word, I want to point to a joyful experience.
Sure.
And a sign of hope, and that is that our co-defendant, Father Steve Kelly, a Jesuit priest, who has literally been incarcerated since the day we did the action.
Right.
He was released yesterday.
Right.
After a brief hearing on the West Coast, where he was shipped out there after he did his time in Georgia to face a warrant out there for a similar action. And Steve was released yesterday. So we all are really rejoicing in that. You should really, if you want to get a sense of a life well lived in nonviolence and resistance, and hope and love, Google Father Steve Kelly, SJ,
Right.
And get a sense of what, or go to the Kings Bay Plowshares website, Kings Bay, or the Kings Bay Plowshares Facebook page, and you'll find a whole lot of information about who Steve is and the great witness that he provides for this country.
Well, and Martin, another final word from
Oh,
you?
yeah. So now there's this big nuclear war. The whole world is destroyed. We're all up outside the pearly gates, St. Peter, and there's a long line. And you finally get up there, and he says, Martin, okay, aren't you an American? You say, yeah. And he says, no, get out of here. You make me sick. And then you see Adolf Hitler eating a cream pie on the other side. He's just shrugging his shoulders. He's like, hey, don't blame me. I don't run this place.
No, he won't be over there eating a cream pie.
Oh, you don't think so?
I don't think so. Anyway, we did just have
We'll cut that
Holocaust
part out.
Remembrance
Don't worry,
Day.
Mark.
You're just, yeah. Well, anyway, so we are getting silly here. So I think even though we have been getting silly, and this is the book that says "Today I Feel Silly." So look it up. It exists. Anyway, but silly or not, I mean, I want to say I am very grateful for both of you, for being here with both of you, and for all the wonderful witness that you've
Amen.
provided.
Amen.
And
Well-
we'll just keep working together to make it happen. And, anyway, so people should go to the Kings Bay Plowshares website. You can also go to Western New York Peace Center. We have links to the Kings Bay Plowshares website as well. And we're grateful for you all. And I just want to say, this is Talking Peace, and together we have been talking peace in truth and love.
Thank you, Buffalo.
Thank you so much.
I love
We're
you.
so grateful. Love you too. Love you both. We'll get there. We're getting there. We'll keep on until we do. Big hugs and love. We'll see you.
You too.
Okay. Bye for now.
Take care, Martin.
Yeah.
We'll talk
Okay.
soon.
All right. Go take your medicine now.
All right.
It's wearing off.
Silly. Today I feel silly. Anyway, okay. We'll see
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Love you.
Thanks so
Take
much.
care.
Thanks so
All
much.
right.
Love you too.
Peace.
Peace.